So I have my miner finished. I switched out. I was running Veddha 56s, but those are obsolete now. So I sold all on eBay. I had 8 Veddha 56s running 15 kilohash. I switched to 3900s. That's the AMD Ryzen 3900X. And I have 4 of them running, which you can see there. I have the complete parts list and also setup in the description for this. So I'm running 4 of the Ryzen's 3900s. You can see my hash rate right now. It's only 6,000, which would be about the same as 3 Veddha 56s. But as soon as November 30th, 2019 comes, this is going to go to 48,000 hash rate. So I'll be going a whole lot higher hash rate compared to what the GPUs could do. So on my setup here, I have the complete description, or the parts list and the setup in the description of the video. And everything's optimized for the lowest price. I'm still waiting on some memories. Like right here, I'm just running 1 stick. So you can only get 8,000 hash with 1 stick. You have to run 4 sticks. It doesn't have to be expensive memory, but it does need to be 3600 megahertz. That way you can run 18 megahertz because memory is ×2. If you run 18 megahertz clock rate, you can get your 12,000 hash on your CPU. And the stock coolers are fine. I only max at 3900 megahertz. I'll show another video where I start optimizing for the RandomX, but basically 3900 or 3.9 gigahertz is pretty decent. You run about 120 watts per CPU, about 50 watts for the motherboard. So this machine times 4, it's going to be about 1 kilowatt of the heat, which is kind of nice. I really like it. It keeps my basement warm. My Veddha 56s were almost going to pay for themselves, but then Monero switching to CPUs, so I ended up selling those. But I do like having a nice warm basement with this heat. So I have on my previous video, I talked more about the setup. I got a 4 selector here, which is really cool. It switches the keyboard, the mouse, and the USB over. I just basically hit the button and I can toggle between each board. So right now I can see on Ryzen Master, you can see 66 Celsius for CPU 1, 67 Celsius CPU 2, 69 Celsius CPU 3, and I just put CPU 4 online, 65 Celsius. And I tried a different heatsink paste. Apparently though, just the stock heatsink paste is pretty darn good. It seems to be better than even this Kingpin, which was pretty good. So AMD already pre-coats their stock heatsinks. And so on my setup, you got to have a GPU just to run your video. The selector is nice because it selects each one separately. You can see power here. It's just running. I'm not running RandomX yet because Monero is still using the latest version of their algorithm. So 180 watts on one board. I'll show more on the power because I'm going to optimize for RandomX. And but right now I got it online, everything running. Really reliable. They're extremely good. You definitely got to run 4 sticks. I got 1 stick running just temporary. I'm waiting on some memory to come in, but just a cheap memory is fine. On that. Got plenty of fans. This is a GPU rack, so I end up modifying it to make it work with 4 motherboards. You really got to have a separate motherboard for each processor, as you can see there. And then the power supplies, they're not super powerful. I think they're 500 watts each. It's in the description. 4 power supplies. I do a common ground where I take some of the ground wires. That way I don't have any sort of, I don't want to run a lot of current, you know, through all my common HDMI cables. And you know, and these motherboards, they're actually pretty reasonable. There's a refurbs available, pretty decent price, but they do want your 8-pin, and then they have another 4-pin. And so I ended up soldering those on, or I do my connectors, and then I cut off all my extra connectors, which I don't need. And everything I tried to do as cheap as possible. Hard drives are very small. You can see right there, those are the little solid state hard drives, like $50 each for 256 gigabyte now. That's like pretty amazing how cheap that stuff is. And then I got some cooling fans. There's no problem with heat because it's an open air rack. So there's no heat buildup, even though I'm 1 kilowatt of heat. Those front fans are kind of moving all the heat out through the back. You actually feel, you can feel a little bit of heat on the back there. And so, you know, running my processor is cool. RandomX does load them up a little bit more than right now. And but I expect, you know, to run around 70C, you know, when they're fully loaded. There's some, you want to run your CPU voltage. I'll show another video on that for the RandomX settings. And just getting set up for November 30th. I'm curious, you know, a lot of the gamers are going to be supporting the Monero network. And these boards, oh, one thing on these boards, they're a little bit older. They're the 470, but they have some pretty decent power supply, you know, to it. You could probably use 450 boards to save a little bit of money, but these 470s, I liked them. They're ASUS. They were more expensive new, but like I said, refurb, I get them for like $175. And they seem to have better cooling. They're 12 phase, which means I got 12 power supplies to drive the 1 volt, you know, drive. And because this thing has to run, you know, for several years, or at least a year. And another thing is I did beef up my power feeding this. I actually almost burned down my house with my GPU. It turns out if you run 15 amps, because it was running basically 15 amps, if you run 15 amps through your plugs, you can, eventually they don't like that and they try to start burning on fire. So I did run a 20 amp circuit. But you know, with 1 kilowatt, this thing's only going to run about 8 amps compared to the GPUs, which were running 15 amps. And anyway, I'll show some more videos when I optimize a little more for RandomX. Hope you like watching the video. Thanks for watching.